This is Cheryl Manley from Sharing Love of Paper. I'm so glad you could join me for another card making class today. For today's class, we're going to be talking about making WOW cards. WOW stands for white on white, a type of card that can be really elegant. We'll also create a special card structure that I call a Pop-Up Aperture card. For it, we'll be using a technique called Faux Embossing. Here's what we'll be using for the first card, our WOW card. A standard 5.5 by 8.5 piece of basic white cardstock for creating the card base, a 5.5 piece of white ribbon, additional basic white cardstock, a small piece of basic white that's 1.5 by 3.25, and an additional piece that is A2 sized, 4.25 by 5.5. I'll show you that piece in a bit. I'll also bring in a bit of bling, but you'll notice that we're not using any patterned paper, colored cardstock, or colored ink for this card. I'll start by scoring my card base in half at 4.25 and creasing it thoroughly with my bone folder. I do like to have a little bit of a lip so the card is able to open easily. The next thing I'll need is this eyelet blooms die. It was a product of the month a few months back, so I only paid $5 for it. It's a single large cutting die. Cutting dies and/or embossing folders are great for adding texture to a WOW card. Here you can see that A2 piece of cardstock that I mentioned. I've already sent it with the die through the Stampin' Cut and Emboss machine. Now I'll carefully pull this off. I need to use a pokey tool to start it. You want to be careful as you pull this up because you don't want to tear it. Now, because there are a lot of holes, you can see that small cardstock pieces get stuck in the holes, both in the die and in the cardstock. You can always poke these out with a pokey tool. One comes in the Take Your Pick tool. But that is quite tedious if you're working with a large, intricate die. You can also get the Take Your Pick die brush tip accessory that can be used with your Take Your Pick tool. It just screws right onto the end where you usually have your pickup tool. That's what I have here. It comes with these foam pads, and it's designed to remove pieces from your cutting die. I thought I'd try it first with the cardstock itself to see if it would also work with that. As you can see, some of those pieces came out of the cardstock, but not as many as I'd like. I'll remove any more with the pokey tool. However, this tool works really well for the cutting die. I just roll all over it with the brush tool. You can see all these pieces that came out. I'll just brush those into the garbage and try again to see if I can get more out. Yes, more came out, but not as many because so many already came out with the first try. I could just keep using this until all pieces are out of the die, but for myself, once most are out, I'll just use the pokey tool on the rest. This brush really saves a lot of time getting little pieces out of your dies. After I got all those pieces poked out of my cardstock, I have a piece like this. You can see that I've also done something else with this. I'm just coming in with my nail and catching the petals on the little flowers and just bending them up a little bit like this. I'm going to leave these 2 rows of flowers flat. You'll see why in a minute. Before I glue that to the card front, I want to add this piece of ribbon with a piece of tear-in tape and press that down really well. Then I'll peel off the backing paper and center the ribbon on the flat portion of this paper. I had a bit of fraying on one end of the ribbon, so I wrapped that side further around than the other. Now I'll just glue it to the card front. You want to just add a narrow bit around the edge, carefully avoiding the petals that are pushed up. I do want to cover the ribbon pretty well. Then add a few more dots of glue here and there to the center to hold it to my card. I like to use liquid glue for this because it gives me more time to center this on my card. I'm just pressing down along the edges. To be safe, I'll turn this over and press to make sure it's attached. If some of these little petals get smashed down, I can always pop them back up again. The next thing I'll do is use this hybrid embossing folder called Thoughtful Moments. I like these so much, and I'm sorry this one is no longer available. Right now, the only one for words is called Story Keeping Hybrid Embossing Folder, and it's designed more for memory keeping projects. Anyway, to use this, I start by lining up the cutting die on the inside of the folder, the back of the side with the Stampin' Up logo. You can use a 6x6 piece of cardstock to cut a bunch of sentiments at a time, but you don't have to. You can just cut a small piece of cardstock to cover the portion you want. Close the folder and run it through your machine. Note that these are 3D embossing folders. Make sure you use the 3D embossing folder sandwich with any hybrid embossing folder. Add your sentiment with mini Stampin' Dimensionals. Another thing you can do with a WOW card, which I haven't done here, is to use your stamps with Versamark ink and white or clear embossing powder. You can see that I'm cutting some of these in half so they fit on the sentiment better. Now I'll just peel off my backing papers and put it in place. So there's my sentiment. Now for some white or clear bling. There's always something available from Stampin' Up, like these rhinestone basic jewels, but today I'm going to use an older product from my stash. It was called Starburst Sequins, and I thought these white ones would be perfect. I usually use my craft knife when I'm adding bling. I had a little discoloration on the sentiment. I don't know how it got there, but I'll use a sequin to hide it. Then I'll just add a couple more. When I'm adding bling, I like to think in terms of what it would look like if I tossed them from a certain direction. If I tossed them, they would tend to spread out more the farther away from the toss point that they get. Remember, it looks better to the eye if we have an odd number of pieces, so I have 5 here. You could use a card like this for many different occasions, for a wedding, for a baptism, for a birthday, or for a sympathy card, anything where you want an elegant look. So, to make a white on white, think of whatever you can use or add that would add interest and dimension without adding color. And there's my first card. Now for my second card. This time I'm making an aperture with pop-up card and doing some faux embossing. This card is also decorated in what I call WOW with a pop, white on white with just a pop of color. I'll just quickly show you what I used for this card. A sentiment stamp. I took mine from a card making kit called Sentimental Rose. I just used the happy birthday stamp from there. You can use anything you have in your stash. A die for die cutting out my sentiment. This time I used one from this mixed labels set from my stash. I'll just quickly show you my prepared sentiment made using these 2 items. I also used some nesting dies. These rectangular ones from a set called Branching Out. I used the 2 smallest dies together, as you can see here. I'll talk about that in just a minute. Then I used some of these delicate framing dies. I used this one, made 2 copies of that. I die cut the flowers and leaves, though ended up not using the leaves. And I used these 2. I just die cut all of those from basic white cardstock. All of these stamps and dies have been discontinued, but you can use whatever you have in your stash to get a similar effect, or buy new from the lovely choices on the Stampin' Up website. The ink I used for stamping my sentiment was this one called Petunia Pop. It was an in color for 2024 to 2026. Again, you can use whatever color you'd like. I'll need a small piece of ribbon and a small piece of cardstock in that same color. Finally, I used 3 pieces of white cardstock. I did use the thick basic white cardstock for the card base to make it a bit more sturdy, a standard 5.5 by 8.5 piece. And then I have a couple of smaller pieces of regular basic white. The largest one, A2 sized, is what I used for die cutting and stamping my sentiment. The smallest one will be used for the pop-up mechanism. That's all I need to make this card. I'll just quickly show you how I made this card. I started with the card base, simply scored it and folded it in half. Then I used those 2 smallest rectangular dies, centering them on my card front. I held them in place with removable tape and then sent it through my die cutting machine to cut through just the card front. This is what came out, a narrow frame and a smaller rectangle. I used both of those dies at once because I wanted to cut a hole in the card front that was the larger size, and I wanted to cut a smaller piece to use on my card. This was what was left. Here you can see the hole that was cut out. You can also see something else. This is where I used those delicate framing dies to die cut these pieces, 2 of each size. You can see that I just glued these pieces on here. It gives the look of an embossed frame, even though I didn't have a frame embossing folder. That's what's called faux embossing. You just use other pieces cut from the same color and glue them on top to give the look of embossing. Now that I have that piece, the next thing I need to do is create my mechanism for the pop-up. I started with a piece of basic white that was 2.5 by 4 1/4. I cut it to 3 inches, so I had one piece that was 2.5 by 3 and a second one that was 2.5 by 1 1/4. Next, using my scoring blade, I scored this larger piece at 1 inch, 1.5 inches, and at 2 1/4 inch, and creased it well, folding each in the same direction. That gives me a section that is 1 inch wide, a section that is 1/2 inch wide, and then 2 sections that are 3/4 inch wide. And I have this additional piece that is 1 1/4. So, now I need to add glue to just the 2 end sections, the one that is 1 inch wide and the one that is 3/4 inch wide. Then I fold this in half with the glued section that is 3/4 inch on the bottom and the 1 inch glued section on top. I stick it inside the card, butting it up against the fold line and centering it in the aperture. Then I'll just close the card and press the glue in place until it holds. Now don't expect it to open all the way. It's not designed to do that. Next, I'm going to just put glue on the section of the mechanism that shows through the card front. Then take the 2.5 by 1 1/4 piece and glue it in place, lining it up along that fold. That's all I need for my pop-up mechanism. Now to add my focal. I forgot to mention that I used the largest of the 2 smallest dies to cut a mat out of the Petunia Pop cardstock to use with that white piece that I had cut out at the beginning of the card. I just glued the white piece to the colored piece. Now I'll bring it in and glue it in place, putting glue just on the part of the mechanism that shows through the aperture. Then I'll line up the matted piece with the aperture. Then I'll press and hold until it's attached. There. Now I'll bring in my sentiment and some decorations. I've been trying to decide if I want to put these up on mini Stampin' Dimensionals, and I think I do. I'll just put one on each side and one in the middle of the top, but not one at the bottom, so it can be more flush down there. I'll just remove the backing papers and attach this in place near the top. I want it centered. There. Now I'm going to bring in my ribbon. I went ahead and tied a bow. You've seen me do that before. I'm going to pick up a mini glue dot and put my bow in place beneath the sentiment. You can see this is mostly white on white, but I've added just a pop of color. The last thing I want to do is add a few little flowers, so I'll add a couple of dots of glue. These are those flowers that I cut using the dies I showed you. I did decide to go ahead and curl up those petals a little bit, just using my fingernail to curl those up. I'll just put that where the dot of glue is and press it down with my Take Your Pick tool. And this one, just pressing it down until it sticks. Then I'll add a few more dots of glue. I'll put one there, and there, and there, and there. Now I'll just add these smaller flowers. Once again, they come flat, and I curled up the petals a bit. I'll just stick them down on top of those dots of glue. I find this much easier when I'm adding little pieces like this, to just add dots of glue to my project and add the little decorative piece to it, rather than trying to put glue on the back of a small piece. Okay, there we have that card, white on white with faux embossing, and just that little pop of color, and it pops up like that when you open it. So that's my second card. I'll bring my first card back in, the white on white. Here are the close-ups. I do hope you've enjoyed this video class. As always, any Stampin' Up! Images are copyright Stampin' Up!, and as an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator, I'd love to have you choose me as your demonstrator when you make purchases from Stampin' Up! I would earn a small commission on any purchases you make, but that would not affect your price. Each month you make a purchase with me, as long as you've chosen to be contacted, you'll receive an email of instructions for that month's class cards in PDF form as my gift to you. You can check the description below for links to some of the materials used in this video and a general link for shopping for Stampin' Up! Products. And if you click that thumbs up, leave me a comment, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so, you'll make my day. Have a great one.